after the Iowa caucuses yesterday, and I think as a point of view listener myself, for many years, I think back to 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, when I was in law school listening to Marlon Maddox on the radio. Who'd have thought I'd have ever been sitting in his chair? Such an honor to do so, and especially in a week when we all need Kirby. I mean, we need the encyclopedia and his knowledge and everything right after the election. But unfortunately, Kirby's out this week, and so you're going to have to deal with me. Unfortunately, also, we have plenty to talk about. So I'm sure we're going to have some great guests on today. Obviously, we're going to talk about the elections, what happened in Iowa, what that means for the future. What is coming down the pike. I mean, there's so many issues we need to talk about on that. And I've also got in studio with me Senior Counsel of Liberty Institute, Jeremy Dice. And Jeremy's going to be here both to comment on the politics of the day as well as a few religious liberty cases. And Jeremy, one of the reasons I thought it'd be great to have you on today is not only do you have the legal background, but you were a family policy council leader for the state of West Virginia. And so you totally understand politicians and politics and how it all works. And so what a day yesterday, huh?
It was quite the day, and to say that we understand politicians, I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult, but I think you and I both worked in that political environment quite a bit and can see kind of the momentous nature of what Iowa represented yesterday. And I think chief among that is just the turnout that was present there. Just 180,000 people, I think, that came out to participate in the caucuses. By any standard, that was the highest margin that anyone's seen. So I think that the people have been waiting 8 years to begin to have a good response to these issues, and it looks like that's what's coming now.
Well, I'll tell you, the things that when you look at the election and you look at yesterday, what are the big one or two takeaways? We could probably talk about 15 of them, but what leaps to your mind as the one or two biggest things that we learned or that we should notice from yesterday?
I think we first see that the polls are wrong and that we ought to stop trusting on the polls and stop putting so much reliance on those issues. That whether it was a 7-point swing to put Trump back into second place and Cruz out in first place, it doesn't really matter. The polls are certainly something not to be relied upon, but we ought to be encouraged to make sure we all hear our voices, that they're heard. I think the other thing you see is that probably what made the difference. He withstood a barrage of attacks in the last couple months of his campaign in Iowa and came out on top of it all, which is pretty interesting considering that he was supposed to come down in second, maybe even in third place. I think you're seeing the Rubio momentum coming out of Iowa, and they're certainly going to be playing that card heading into New Hampshire and then South Carolina, where they hope to capitalize upon the success that he's had in a late break in Iowa. And we could do a lot worse as a country than nominating a guy like Marco Rubio. So that's throughout the rest of the candidates below there, where we're having a former Bush that's polling, I think he spent $25,000 per vote to get a very few percentage points in there.
If you include the PAC, I think that's the PAC. In his own campaign, it was like $2,800 a vote. But either way, it's really bad.
It's not good. It's really not good. And you've got a lot of other cases that are out the case itch, and you've got the other candidates that some of us don't even remember they're actually running for president, that actually filtered out to the bottom. But they may play a factor. A lot of the middle road people, the moderate Republicans, so to speak, when they go to New Hampshire, it may have a reverse effect of what we've seen in previous years in Iowa, where the moderate candidate is able to eke out a win because there are so many diverse conservative candidates out there. You could see the reverse of that happening now in New Hampshire, where the moderate candidates are so many that they end up splitting the vote and allowing a conservative like Cruz or Rubio to be able to get a higher percentage of the vote, which could be interesting.
Yeah, the last poll, the real clear average of the polling in New Hampshire had Trump up by 22 points over his next, the number two, I think, which is either Kasich or Cruz, depending upon. So you've got to wonder how that's going to change in light of what happened. And I want the listeners to know, we're going to have on Ken Blackwell and Gary Bauer before we're done today and talk to them, the people with incredible experience in this arena, and find out some of the big things to them. But I also want point of view listeners to know that if they go to pointofview.net, they can get the articles that reference a number of the things we're talking about. For instance, 5 takeaways from Iowa is one of them. And as you mentioned, Jeremy, one of the things that's a takeaway that I'm seeing in a lot of the articles is the bad polling. And I think people are really beginning to question how helpful polling is. I mean, it helps to some extent, but I think it's hard to be very accurate anymore because cell phones and there's just so many variables, and this is happening both not just in the United States, it's happening overseas. So a lot of these media phenomenon are just that. They're media phenomenon, or they're exaggerated at least. And it just sort of is a reminder to all of us that, go and vote. Be responsible. Don't think that because you see something on the news that that's the way it is. Because the polling shouldn't be leading people. That the polling should be maybe reflecting some things, maybe a snapshot that may or may not be totally accurate. And people really need to not be led by what they see in the media.
That is so key. They need to be their own man, their own woman. Don't be tossed to and fro by the waves of the public polling here. Make sure you're making up your own mind based upon an informed decision that you've come to, not that has been foisted upon you. So, I think we also ought to look at the other side of this as well, because there was a caucus on the Democratic side going on yesterday as well. And, if it hadn't been for the flip of 6 coins, that could have been an other way a winner, if you will. It's basically 50-50 between a progressive Democrat and a socialist Democrat that has eked out over there.
Well, I want to make sure people know what you just said, because a lot of people, might not know how it happened in the caucus yesterday on the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton allegedly won by 4 delegates, and yet the story is that 6 of the delegates were determined by a coin flip, and somehow Hillary Clinton's campaign won 6 out of 6, which is
I've joked on
high
Twitter.
Odds.
I joked on Twitter today that Mrs. Clinton probably should go to the FBI and say, "Hey, how about we flip a coin?" And just see how things turn out. No, I think it was 1 in 64 are the odds that could happen. So congratulations to Mrs. Clinton on that front at the very least. But to your point, had that gone any other way, that could have been a net 2 for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, let's say that they just don't. I mean, that to me, that you should not decide a delegate by a flip of the coin. So let's say they just said, okay, a tie is a tie, we won't count it. Bernie Sanders wins.
That's right.
And I mean, a 74-year-old avowed socialist wins. I mean, that's obviously big news in the Democratic Party. I mean, certainly Hillary Clinton was supposed to run away with this, and now, it's not looking good at all for.
But you're right to say that it's not a good way to be deciding. Again, to look at to not put too much stock in the polling data, but to look back in the history where this time last year, Mrs. Clinton was leading Bernie Sanders. I think it was something like 57-5 or 58-4, something to that effect. A whole are now standing
as well. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
During one of the Democratic presidential debates, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was asked about the ongoing email scandal. Senator Bernie Sanders jumped in and declared that the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your blank emails. Now, that was months ago. It might no longer be true because the periodic document dumps from Mrs. Clinton's server are raising more questions every day. She has insisted, quote, "I did not send classified information and I did not receive any material that was marked or designated classified, which is the way you find something out," unquote. That is not what the government officials looking at the emails have found. Michael Mukasey served as a U.S. Attorney General from 2007 to 2009. He believes that criminal charges must be filed against Hillary Clinton. He points out that some of the emails on her server contained information that is at the highest level of classification. This is called SAP, or Special Access Program. The level of security is so high that even the Inspector General for the intelligence community, who reported on the discovery, was not initially cleared to examine those emails. It is nearly certain that Mrs. Clinton's server was hacked, possibly by the Chinese or the Russians. Foreign governments may know more about our policies and agents than even members of Congress or the intelligence community. Bob Woodward is the Washington Post reporter who helped uncover the Watergate scandal 40 years ago. He recently compared the latest revelations about Hillary Clinton's email scandal to Watergate. He said it shows that she kind of feels immune. She lives in a bubble, and no one's ever going to find this out. Well, now we have. Yes, now we have, and it's likely that criminal charges will indeed be filed against Hillary Clinton. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kelly Shakelford in studio for Kirby, who's out this week, and boy, did he leave at the wrong time. There's a lot to talk about with the elections. I thought two things I want to mention right up front here. Number one, there are 28 states that the deadline to register to vote is this month. And so if you don't know if you're registered or you're not or anything like that, or even if you've got friends who might not be registered, go to pointofview.net. There is a button on there that says vote, a big block, and you can click on it, and it will even guide you on how to do that. But definitely you need to be registered to vote. This election is going to be going on for a while, and it's important that you're a part of it. So I thought we would start out with some clips. Let's start out with the winner on the Republican side, Ted Cruz, and some things he said right after the victory.
Iowa has sent notice that the Republican nominee and the next president of the United States will not be chosen by the media. Will not be chosen by the Washington establishment. Will not be chosen by the lobbyists. But will be chosen by the most incredible, powerful force where all sovereignty resides in our nation, by we, the people, the American people. Tonight, thanks to the incredible hard work of everyone gathered here, of courageous conservatives across this state, we together earned the votes of 48,608 Iowans. To put in perspective your incredible victory that you have won tonight, that is the most votes ever cast for any Republican primary winner.
That's a lot to say. I mean, there's some things that Senator Cruz talks about there. Number one, that he got the most votes. And what everybody said was that if there was a high turnout, if there were a lot of extra people, that would mean that Trump wins. Again, sometimes people don't know really what they're talking about. I mean, they speak confidently. It turned out there was a massive turnout, much greater than people expected, and yet, Senator Cruz won. So, what's the explanation for that?
I think the only explanation, I think the commentators agree today, looking at a number of the articles from the Politico to elsewhere, it's his ground game. He's got the best machine that is put into place right now, better than anybody else, and certainly better than Donald Trump. There, but has really never overcome that 25-ish% range, even in the polling data, as much as we want to trust the polling data, but still has not really overcome that kind of 0.25% of people who say they support Donald Trump. When push comes to shove in politics, he who has been to the most doors see that with Marco Rubio, who had a really late surge based upon his good last couple debate performances and some of the hammering he took on with both with Bush as well as with towards Senator Cruz. But he even had a reasonable ground game out there, I think in particular of their faith director, who's done a lot of great work out in Iowa to really rally around some of the more conservative votes that would have gone to Ted Cruz. But bottom line, I think Cruz is right. When you pull out 48,608 different voters coming for you, and that's the highest turnout for any Republican resonating at the grassroots level. Those are the people you want to have turn out for you in a general election, too.
Yeah, I know one of the examples Senator Cruz gave last night was a little 13-year-old girl who made over 800 phone calls in one day. And you multiply that times the Cruz campaign has been saying a while now they have over 200,000 volunteers around the country. I mean, they rented out an entire old college campus there in all their dorm rooms and put their volunteers there in Iowa. But they've got this going on around the country. That does make a difference if a 13-year-old girl, calls on behalf of somebody and calls 800 people a day, and you start multiplying that out. It can reach a lot of people.
And it's not just in Iowa. I mean, he's got that elsewhere, too, so that he certainly has an edge in that front going into the next couple primaries. We'll see how they turn out.
Well, one of the things I was a little surprised by, and I think a lot of people were kind of waiting to see, how does Trump respond? Because he usually doesn't respond very well when he's challenged, and yet I think he was pretty very gracious last night. So let's hear what he had to say.
On June 16th, when we started this journey, there were 17 candidates. I was told by everybody, do not go to Iowa. You could never finish even in the top 10. And I said, but I have friends in Iowa. I know a lot of people in Iowa. I think they'll really like me. Let's give it a shot. They said, don't do it. I said, I have to do it. And we finished second. And I want to tell you something. I'm just honored. I'm really honored. And I want to congratulate Ted, and I want to congratulate all of the incredible candidates, including Mike Huckabee, who's become a really good friend of mine. So congratulations to everybody. Congratulations.
I thought, a very good political move by Trump, which he hasn't always done that type of thing. And I think that was gracious and well done. But at the same time, I'm listening to what he says, and he particularly points out becoming a friend with Mike Huckabee, who is the only Republican who has pulled out of the race.
That's right.
So he's even politically, he's moving when he is being gracious with his, the fact that he lost, and people were wondering how he would respond.
Yeah, there are people that are very close to me that support Trump, and I just can't get on the bandwagon, so to speak, right now. I have a hard time getting past some of what I see as some disingenuous marketing here. He had this is a brilliant marketing move to be able to say, hey, look, I've been bombastic throughout this whole campaign. Now I'm going to be very professional and courteous and conciliatory. And he did the perfect thing, as you just pointed out. He pivoted right off of that to who can I grab, who else do I need? And he goes right to Mike Huckabee on all this. So it'll be interesting to see what's the next step for the Donald here.
And the other story, obviously, the big story is Ted Cruz won. Which, in fact, I've in front of me, I don't know if we have this on the website or not, but we do. But Ben Shapiro's article that says Cruz is the new front runner. He doesn't mean that he won Iowa. He means, and Ben Shapiro's a pretty bright guy, and he says that Cruz is now the front runner for the whole thing. So that's pretty big news. Big news is Trump didn't win. And the other big news, though, is Marco Rubio moving up and, as many said, sort of demolishing the establishment lane competition. And obviously was very energetic last night. Let's hear what he had to say.
For months, they told us we had no chance. For months, they told us because we offered too much optimism in a time of anger, we had no chance. For months, they told us because we didn't have the right endorsements or the right political connections, we had no chance. They told me that we had no chance because my hair wasn't gray enough and my boots were too high. They told me I needed to wait my turn, that I needed to wait in line. But tonight here in Iowa, the people of this great state have sent a very clear message. After 7 years,
a lot of energy. Certainly, Marco Rubio came up, and this has been sort of the question. I mean, which you've got Kasich, you've got Bush, you've got Christie, you got Rubio, all sort of competing for that establishment lane, that establishment spot, and really, you had them fighting each other. I mean, Bush just laid the ads and the PAC ads and everything else attacking Marco Rubio. And you could add all of them together, and they don't even, I don't know, what did they equal? Less than half of what he got. So that's a huge victory as far as where he moved from in that lane.
Yeah, and I think if we've linked to it or not, we have linked to it on our website about the Atlantic article, Rubio's Surge is a Triumph for Trumpism. And what the article basically goes to point out is that what Rubio's success is largely due to the fact that he has been able to kind of repackage Trump into a more palatable form. He's not the rude, braggadocious Donald Trump that we all know and love. He's kind of the softer side of things, but he's saying a lot of the same things. And that ought to be cause for concern for those who are of the more conservative persuasion of things. I don't think it's a death knell, but I think it certainly is something that we ought to be watching very, very carefully as the months unfold.
Yeah, it's an interesting article. I thought it was well written and well thought out, and it's something to watch. I come back because you're not going to want to miss Ken Blackwell. We want to get his analysis, and then we're going to start going deeper on this and taking phone calls as well.
When you're listening to or watching network news, do you ever start talking to the newsreader or anchor person? Come on, you can admit it, you do, don't you? You can't believe what you're hearing, and you feel the need to correct them. Sometimes you almost feel like you're living in a different world, and you are. People who deny God are living in a world of make-believe. The next time you're shaking your head at the news, I want you to do something. Pick up the phone, or write a check, or visit us online and give. Point of View brings you a biblically informed analysis of what's happening, but to do it, we need your partnership. Visit pointofview.net and click the link next to Donate Now where it says Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Or mail your donation for this month to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. That's Box 30, Dallas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Don't just shake your head. Make a difference. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
This is Kelly Shakelford again, libertyinstitute.org, here guest hosting today as Kirby is out, and certainly a lot to talk about with the elections. And I'm excited about our next segment because with us on the phone, we have a guest and a friend, Ken Blackwell. Ken is a senior fellow at Family Research Council. He's on the boards of all kinds of groups, Club for Growth, National Rifle Association, you name it. And was Secretary of State in Ohio and just, I think, mayor of Cincinnati, on and on and on. But mainly Ken's a guy who really is one of the leaders in the country, certainly in the political world from the conservative and Christian viewpoint, and really knows his way around really the world. And so I thought he'd be a great guy to have come on today and talk to us about the election. Ken, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Hey, Kelly, good to be with you.
Well, I'd love to hear your analysis of what you think happened yesterday and so what you think that means going forward.
Going into the race in Iowa, I was looking at three things from their muscle, their ground organization, the number of volunteers that they have been able to galvanize to push their candidacy, both using new technology and the old-fashioned way, door knocking and person-to-person contact. It was my belief, and it continues to be my belief, a candidate that can put together message, muscle, and money, particularly in this first race, could actually gain momentum. And I think that's what happened last night. Senator Cruz was able to put together message, muscle, money, and he has momentum going into the next couple of races. And so for the movement in general, the conservative movement, it was a good night. For consistent conservative legislators and political leaders, it was a double treat. And so from the vantage point of the organizations that you just mentioned, there were a number of consistent conservatives running, but not all of them were able to put together those ingredients that I just outlined. The way that the Cruz campaign did.
No, that's great. That's one of the reasons why I love having you, Ken, is you have the experience to know. I mean, a lot of people look and they get excited about the candidate and maybe even what they're saying, but when's the last time that there was a really solid conservative running at the time of Iowa and they had maybe the most money of anybody in the race or the most campaign structure? I mean, that's just unheard of, and yet when you look at things now, I mean, I think there was an article this morning that said Ted Cruz has 5 times says a lot and says a lot about the structure going forward, I think, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And one of the things that I was impressed with is that he was able to, and his campaign team was able to do something that the author and writer John Nesbitt said in his book that was a bestseller, Megatrends, back in the early 80s. He said that folks who could master technology but also add to it high touch would in fact be masters of their particular spheres of influence. And so one of the things that we saw, and it's a lesson for campaigns into the future, we saw the perfect blend of the use of technology, but the added human dimension of high touch. So those volunteers were door knocking, making calls. It was church member to church member, family member to family member, consistent conservative to consistent conservative, and they were able to triumph. And that, again, it's going to be very important going into New Hampshire, one of the things that we know from experience is that winning Iowa does not automatically give you a win in New Hampshire. But I can tell you, you rather take the momentum of winning Iowa into New Hampshire than not. So it's going to be a good race in New Hampshire. There's going to be some consolidation around and I think the folks from the so-called establishment will probably try to whittle their field down to one or two folks after New Hampshire. So New Hampshire is going to be a weeding out experience for the so-called establishment candidates.
Hey Ken, Jeremy Dice here. Hey, I was looking back over through some of the past Iowa caucuses, and you got to go back to the year 2000 and George W. Bush winning that one. I think to come away as the ultimate nominee, if I'm not mistaken. You know, we've had Huckabee as other ones, and I looked on the wrong side of the ledger. But
Santorum.
Right, Santorum. Thanks. Is there any concern on your part, or what do you make of, probably is a better way of putting it, that Cruz comes out on top, you've got Trump in second place? Is there any concern that or thought that the second or maybe even third place winners here may be able to leapfrog in the next couple states? How does that play out?
Well, I think it's going to be a real contest in New Hampshire. I think Trump has been humbled, and it all turns on how he takes that and whether or not in a more traditional sense, his team can put together crowned a federal winner last night, and so he's going to try to clear his lane, and then you have Senator Cruz, who I think will tap into the libertarian streak and share of the marketplace, political marketplace in New Hampshire. But I would think that Senator Cruz will not put all of his marbles into New Hampshire, but I think he will try to carry the momentum into South Carolina. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a biggie right there.
Absolutely. In fact, let's say we're at a three-person race, which I know Marco Rubio would like to make it a three-person race. How does that play differently? It seems like when you start to have these consolidations, I haven't seen any polling or anything, but I wonder if it was just those three, how does that split up? Do you have any handle on that and how people would go in that type of a situation?
Well, I think it would be a real dogfight in South Carolina, but the prize of winning South Carolina for Senator Cruz would be that it takes him into the SEC contest at the 1st of March. If, in fact, he wins in South Carolina, he then plays into his strength. So understanding that, you then understand where the attack is going to come from, because more than one candidate is going to basically see stopping him in South Carolina as being key to keeping the contest competitive.
Do you attack now from both sides, from Trump and from Rubio, or do you think Rubio's maybe that's what will happen, and then the other establishment people will attack Rubio? Is that the most expected, with all the money in the PACs?
Yeah, and one of the things that I tell folks who find themselves in the position that Senator Cruz finds himself in is that it's something that my dad used to say: dogs don't bark at parked cars. so be ready for it, and actually rejoice that you have all the barking dogs. That means that you're on the move.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, one of the things I wonder is, at what point does Trump feel like that Rubio is a possible danger, and does he feel like he needs to, go after Rubio?
Believe me, that's going to be played out in New Hampshire. How he does it will be interesting, but he can't keep the kid gloves on with Rubio. going into New Hampshire. This is a unfortunately at times it's a blood sport. At least it's a full contact sport.
Absolutely. Well, Ken, we just want to thank you, number one, for being with us, but thank you for all you do, your stance, your involvement in so many important groups, and being really a witness for the truth in that role. And I know Family Research Council is proud to have you as a senior fellow, and so many of these groups, I don't even have time to mention them, that a lot of our listeners love. They so appreciate all you do.
Good being with you guys.
Thanks.
Good being with you guys. And remember, when the foundation is attacked, it's time for the righteous to take a stand.
Amen. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kelly Shakelford here, sitting in for Kirby and LibertyInstitute.org. Liberty Institute's the group I run. We're talking about really the elections and just what that means for the future. We're having some great guests. Gary Bauer will be with us at 2 o'clock as well, 2 o'clock Central. One of the things I want to do is remind everybody out there, if you are not registered, maybe you moved and you're not registered where you are now, or you're not sure if you're registered. 28 states have this month as the date, as the month at which it's your last time to register. So Point of View has an easy tab. You can go to pointofview.net, tab on the vote tab, and it'll lead you through how to make sure you're registered to vote. And I would just encourage you, every believer needs to be registered to vote. We need to represent Christ in every area of life, and that includes in the voting booth. So make sure you do that. The other thing I want to do is give out the call-in number. We're going to start taking calls if you want to talk about what you're seeing in the election, whether you're excited, depressed, where you think things are going. 1-800-351-1212 is the call-in number. 1-800-351-1212. What we're going to do now is I want to cover a couple of quick. And there were two significant cases on religious freedom that flared up within the last week. In fact, were carried all over the news nationwide. Jeremy, tell the listeners first about the big decision in the Kuntz cheerleaders case.
Yeah, last week, at the end of the week, there was an 8-0 victory at the Texas Supreme Court protecting free speech and religious liberty rights of all of Texas's students. This is a very important case that reaches far beyond the state of Texas. And the reason this matters is that the outcome of this case really could determine the future of free speech and religious freedom rights for every school child in Texas, and really by extension, all the other school districts across the country that are paying attention here. What happened in a nutshell is that there were some cheerleaders down in Kuntz, Texas, who got sick of having the, go smash them, go kill the other side kind of banners that these football players would run through. Instead, they decided to write Bible verses on these cheerleading banners, big paper banners that the guys used to plow through on the way out to the field. And the school district decided that was the wrong message to be sending, and they started censoring these things and saying that you can't say Bible verses here. And it became a battle between what we call in the lawyer profession government speech versus private speech. The district contended that when the words were written on the paper by the cheerleaders, that became the speech of the government and therefore could violate the Establishment Clause. Somehow a cheerleading banner could establish a religion in this country. I don't quite understand that point. We argued, and I think correctly, and the Supreme Court has now agreed with us, at least in principle, that no, this is the private speech. When these cheerleaders buy the paper, they paint the messages on there, they hold the banners up themselves, and the guys run through them. That is the speech of the cheerleaders themselves. And I think the court at the Texas Supreme Court found that persuasive because, they found it so straightforward they didn't even argue or require an oral argument about it, but instead sent it back to the Court of Appeals for them to actually finally resolve this matter and permanently, we hope, resolve it in favor of the cheerleaders themselves. And that's big. I don't know if people caught that, but the appeal, and then a lot of people have heard about this case. It's been in the New York Times 4 times, Wall Street Journal 4 times. If you go to libertyinstitute.org if you want to see the case and see some of the articles and things around the country. But this wasn't just a win. The state Supreme Court said, we're not even going to hear argument. This is 8-0, case over as far as this issue. So this could really help around the country. I mean, and think of the danger if the other argument were accepted. If when you step onto government property and speak, that is now government speech, and therefore the government can do whatever it wants in telling you what you can believe or not believe, what you can express and not. I mean, that's very dangerous, and that's what they were trying to do here, is saying, well, yeah, we know they're private citizens, but when they're cheerleaders, and even though they're spending their money, even though it's their paper, it's their paint, and their everything, if they express something, since they're at a football game, we're going to say it's government speech, and we can control what they say. And we can ban only the religious things that they say no. So very good victory. And there's another case, though, that just started that is even as equally disturbing out of Florida. That's right. And sticking with the theory of, or the realm of football here, 2 Christian schools in Florida earned the right to play in the high school 2A championship football game. Their practice had long been, in fact, since 1964 in the case of one of the schools, to open all their athletic contests with a prayer over the loudspeaker. And so they asked the Florida High School Athletic Association to be able to use their loudspeaker to say a prayer before kickoff. The High School Athletic Association there in Florida said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that because we're a state actor and we can't endorse this kind of speech. And number 2, it's our property, or it's the state's property anyway, the Citrus Bowl in Orlando. You can't use our speakers because we can't use our speakers to pray over, and specifically to be able to pray. Well, in both of these cases, what we're seeing is school districts and the Florida High School Athletic Association that are teaching a really bad message to our kids. In the case of the FHSAA, it's that it's wrong to engage in prayer in public. In the case of Kuntz, the school district there in Kuntz, it's that you shouldn't be putting religious messages on pieces of paper. That's wrong. And these kinds of things need to stop, and they need to stop immediately.
That's good. I mean, I think, people here, maybe their candidate's not winning now and they're depressed. Well, here's some good news. There's ultimately what we're fighting over, freedom, and especially religious freedom for point of view listeners. There's some victories happening, and we will hear outside of the elections. Let's go back, though, because we're going to start having calls and really going to dig in more on these elections. Let's look at the Democratic side very quickly, and let's hear first what Hillary Clinton said last night after, I think at the time she didn't know she had a victory, and still it's questionable, but what she would call her victory today.
When it is all said and done, we have to be united against a Republican vision and candidates who would drive us apart and divide us. That is not who we are, my friends. I followed their campaign very closely. I understand what they're appealing to, and I intend to stand against it. I will not let their divisiveness, their efforts to rip away the progress that we've made, be successful, because we can't afford that. So as I stand here tonight, breathing a big sigh of relief, thank you, Iowa.
What a dramatic, you watch the Republican and the Democrat, and it's just so interesting. I mean, she's like, I am not going to allow the progress that we've made, and essentially, hooking herself to the Obama administration, saying this is real progress, whereas the other side is saying they've almost finished our country in the 7 years. So interesting battle, but she's very pleased, but really I think more relieved that a 74-year-old socialist didn't really beat her. Although, again, I think Bernie Sanders hasn't said yet whether there's a victory or not. Let's hear what he had to say very quickly.
And tonight, while the results are still not known, it looks like we are in a virtual tie. I think the people of Iowa have sent a very profound message to the political establishment, to the economic establishment, and, by the way, to the media establishment.
A lot of energy, certainly, in the Bernie Sanders camp. And, normally you look at that and you think that's really neat. You love to see excitement in politics, but when it's for not something that people are using as a bad name, that's socialism, but when the candidate admits he's a socialist, I think it's shocking to a lot of Americans that the Democratic Party has somebody who's close to, 50-50 in Iowa and supposed to win New Hampshire, that is an avowed socialist.
Absolutely, and I think we're going to get into this in a bit with Gary Bauer a little bit more, but look, if it came down to a coin toss several different times and we're talking about a potential socialist, this is a consequential election in so many ways.
Absolutely. We'll be right back to talk more politics, or call 1-800-351-1212 and we'll get you on.
Later this year, for the 58th time, America will choose a president. As a Christian, what are you doing to prepare for the election? Helping you cut through the major media spin is part of the mission of Point of View. We want to provide the best election resources, including a new website, Pray, Organize, Vote, encouraging people to intercede for the upcoming election, to help you get registered so you can exercise the stewardship of voting, to share things to help you get people involved and out to the polls. But to do all of that, we need you to vote right now with your support for Point of View. Show us that you're in this for the long haul as a citizen of heaven as well as the United States. Click Donate Now at the top of the page and give the most generous one-time gift you can at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. There is a lot of work to be done. Let's get to it together. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our
Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonder. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Hi, this is Kelly Shakelford, Liberty Institute, libertyinstitute.org. And I am sitting in for Kirby today, who's out of the country, actually, but will be back, and I know everybody looks forward to having him back. We're now going to have, and with me, my co-host is Senior Counsel at Liberty Institute, Jeremy Dice. And it's good to have you here today, Jeremy. And now we're actually going to have join us on the phone a good friend who I think so many Point of View listeners have known for many years. And I'll give him a little write-up, but I don't really have to. Everybody knows who Gary Bauer is. With the Reagan administration, ran for president himself, and maybe he can tell us a little bit about that in this process. But is the chairman of the Campaign for Working Families PAC, and sends out that great, really piece every day that educates so many people across the country. Gary, we love having you here, and it's going to be great to hear your comments on the election.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Good to be with you and Jeremy, and it's a very bright day in Washington after the results in Iowa. I think that was an extraordinary caucus this cycle, and of course you and I are both Ted Cruz fans, so it's great to see what the final outcome was there.
Well, I was really surprised. The last 2 weeks, the attacks on Cruz were pretty heavy. I think you had Rubio and Trump. Line in many ways, and the fact that you had the governor of the state come out and say to vote for Cruz is suicide. I've never heard such stuff. The Des Moines newspaper with a big headline saying "bad day for Cruz" after the debate. He was getting hit, and I felt like the same thing was happening on Fox News. That Fox seems to have they. And the polls were saying he was down. Everything was saying he was down. But you know what? People eventually get to vote. And so I think it was fascinating to see what happened yesterday.
Kelly, your analysis is exactly the same thing I was thinking. My goodness, they were throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, and then, several kitchen sinks a day. It was amazing and kind of sad to watch. I don't know why I got so upset about it, because former Senator Bob Dole is a good man that served our country in World War II. But for some reason, in his elderly years here, they carted him out, and there was an interview with him on Fox News, and Senator Dole went through a litany of attacks on Senator Cruz that literally, I'm not exaggerating, they were talking points that the White House has put out over the years. That Ted Cruz is an extreme conservative. No, he's a conservative who every position is exactly consistent with Republican platforms of probably the last 4 or 5 presidential cycles. Senator Dole said that Cruz had shut the government down. No, that was Barack Obama who shut the government down. So it just went on, and I did worry that all these attacks and so forth would take their toll. I assumed they had to hurt to some degree, but even with that, he's still had a 3 percentage point landslide. That's not bad under the circumstances.
It was. I mean, I think it would surprise a lot of people. Tell me this. I mean, I'd love your analysis on this because I haven't seen a two-person race. And for instance, it was Trump beating every other person in a two-person race except for Cruz. Cruz beats Trump in that situation. How do you see a three-person race? I mean, if it ends up being Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, and Ted Cruz, how does that split up, or do we have any inkling on that?
I think it's hard to handicap it. You know, I think that Cruz most embodies the three-legged stool, is how we refer to it, of what Ronald Reagan believed in. You know, a smaller government, lower taxes, that's one leg. A strong national defense is the other. And then the third leg is, traditional values, sanctity of life, religious liberty. And he's got a solid record on all those things. So, but look, Rubio has a claim he can make on those issues, and he will make it. I'm having a hard time figuring out how it all comes out. I've been a little puzzled by the fact that folks that really don't want Trump didn't just rally to Cruz, because, as you said, when you see these one-on-one polls, Cruz is the only one that can beat Trump on a one-on-one, apparently. And but obviously the folks are split. Evangelicals are split. It's one heck of a year. I think about the only thing we can ultimately agree on is that any of the three would be better than the real socialists, Senator Sanders, or the pretend non-socialist, Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Gary, because that's exactly where I wanted you to go next here. And I read a great article by David Harsanyi on the Federalist this morning talking about, and I'm going to quote from his article, he says, Democrats are no longer talking about erecting safety nets to help taxation and redistributing to make life fair for the middle class, unquote. Gary, you've lived the blue-collar Democrat life growing up, and you've railed well against this type of thing coming. But now we're here where the choice is a pseudo-socialist and an avowed socialist. What are we going to do about this, and who is best equipped to speak against this, especially in a generation that seems to be enamored with a 74-year-old Vermont senator?
Yeah, it's a great question. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's no pretend here about what their plans are. You'll hear Bernie Sanders say college and a higher education should be completely free, and his young crowds roar their approval, obviously never having been taught what you should know by the third grade, that nothing is free. Somebody pays for it one way or the other. And, of course, Bernie Sanders doesn't leave you in the dark about this. He says we'll pay for it by taxing the speculators on Wall Street. Well, what? I don't even know what that means. Is he talking about people that buy and sell stock? I mean, that's a big part of what drives our economy. But this is the new approach. It's not even hidden by the rhetoric of compassion. It's kind of just raw envy. We will use the power of government to take the money somebody else has made, and we will give it away to our favorite groups in order to buy their votes. I'm hoping the American people are smart enough to know that that's what got us into the mess we've been in the last couple of years, and will only make it worse. As far as who can articulate the answer to that best, I believe Cruz, hands down, is the right person to do that. I think Rubio could do it too, maybe not as well in some ways, but I don't think Trump can do it at all, because I don't think he's got a grounding in what we would call Reagan conservatism.
Gary, thanks so much for being with us today. Just a historic election, and I think this one's going to be very interesting to follow. Really appreciate you and all you do at Campaign for Working Families. We're going to come back and
Kelly.
Thank you, and talk about politics. 1-800-351-1212.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
During one of the Democratic presidential debates, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was asked about the ongoing email scandal. Senator Bernie Sanders jumped in and declared that the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your blank emails. Now, that was months ago. It might no longer be true because the periodic document dumps from Mrs. Clinton's server are raising more questions every day. She has insisted, quote, "I did not send classified information and I did not receive any material that was marked or designated classified, which is the way you find something out," unquote. That is not what the government officials looking at the emails have found. Michael Mukasey served as a U.S. Attorney General from 2007 to 2009. He believes that criminal charges must be filed against Hillary Clinton. He points out that some of the emails on her server contained information that is at the highest level of classification. This is called SAP, or Special Access Program. The level of security is so high that even the Inspector General for the intelligence community, who reported on the discovery, was not initially cleared to examine those emails. It is nearly certain that Mrs. Clinton's server was hacked, possibly by the Chinese or the Russians. Foreign governments may know more about our policies and agents than even members of Congress or the intelligence community. Bob Woodward is the Washington Post reporter who helped uncover the Watergate scandal 40 years ago. He recently compared the latest revelations about Hillary Clinton's email scandal to Watergate. He said it shows that she kind of feels immune. She lives in a bubble, and no one's ever going to find this out. Well, now we have. Yes, now we have. And it's likely that criminal charges will indeed be filed against
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kelly Shakelford in for Kirby Anderson today. Kelly Shakelford at Liberty Institute. You can go and look at any of the religious freedoms cases you want at libertyinstitute.org. I'm in here with Jeremy Dice, Senior Counsel, Liberty Institute, and also former Family Policy Council leader out in West Virginia, so understands politics and legislature and all the goings on. And so we've been talking about the election yesterday. There are a number of callers, and if you want to get in on the lines, you can call it 1-800-351-1212, and we'll talk about that as well. I would just start out by saying, everybody's looking at this like there are three lanes at this point, or three people. You've got yesterday was such a separation with Cruz and Trump and Rubio. And the idea, and what everybody said on the media yesterday, was that Rubio, it looks like, was about to capture the establishment lane. And, it's hard to define these things. I'd say I'd look at each of the candidates with their own strengths and weaknesses. You've got Ted Cruz, whose strength is consistent conservatism. You've got Donald Trump, whose strength is somewhat of his bombasticness, his courage, his willing to bust right through a lot of the foolishness that's been going on, the political correctness and these type of things. And you've got Marco Rubio, who is an incredibly well-spoken and a charming individual, and I think a good political candidate. The downside to all these people, though, is there as well, and that is Donald Trump has never really been a conservative. He doesn't have a history of that. You've got Ted Cruz, who doesn't have the charm that Marco Rubio does. But you've got Rubio, who ran as a Tea Party guy and then really failed the Tea Party. And has shown himself to be, he would, if you listed his positions, they would all be conservative. But the problem is he's not a guy who's shown himself to be a conservative who fights for conservative principles. In fact, the only real fight was when he joined the Gang of Eight. So everybody's got their weakness, and so I don't know how these three candidates, if that's what we end up with, pan out. I don't think we can say it's three yet for sure until after New Hampshire, because I think the establishment is going to have one big brawl. I don't know. It's kind of like you put them in a cage match, or what they do with, wrestling or whatever on TV. I think they're going to throw the establishment guys in, and Jeb Bush is liable to launch every pack ad he can on Marco Rubio, I'm sure. But somebody's going to come out of that, and right now you'd have to guess it's Marco Rubio. And I'm not sure how that works out, Jeremy. I don't know who's got the lead in that situation.
Yeah, I don't either. I said earlier at the top of the show that one of the things that may be laying in wait for us in New Hampshire is kind of the reverse of what has happened in past Iowa caucuses in the conservative side, where you've had a dilution of the conservative vote over a great many very conservative candidates, such that the moderate candidate is able to kind of rise to the top. I think with a Kasich, with Christie still in the race, with Jeb Bush, who's still pulling the moderate card, and Trump, who is clearly a moderate at best on a lot of these fronts, I think if you look at those votes out there, they could very well dilute that moderate vote so much that you could see Rubio and Cruz getting more and more into the polls. Certainly Rubio carries momentum coming out of Iowa simply because no one really expected him to do as well as he did. And he came very close to knocking off the number 2 spot there in Iowa, and that says a lot. But then you also have the momentum of the actual winner in Ted Cruz and the guy who has the actual ground game in more states than just Iowa. And I think you've got that to play there as well. Will they finish 1-2 in New Hampshire rather? I tend to doubt that. I still think that the moderate Republican is the one who's going to overcome that slot as well. If that'll be Kasich or Christie, or more likely Donald Trump. We'll have to see where that plays out. But at the very minimum, at least on this side of the debate, we're having a debate upon general freedom and not versus a progressive versus a socialist. That's a good thing to be having.
Well, and I think it's odd because the reason this is so hard with these three people is I think if you go by conservative or moderate, you'd put, as far as their positions through the years, you'd put Donald Trump in the non-conservative and the more moderate. You'd put Ted Cruz in the most conservative. You put Marco Rubio, in between Cruz and Trump, closer to Cruz probably. But then if you put it in the establishment and anti-establishment, Donald Trump is anti-establishment in his campaign.
Or is he? Or is he, right? Because I think what we're certainly learning at this point in the race is that there's been a very well-crafted marketing campaign that's been driving his political campaign, and he will say anything to anybody to be able to get to where he wants to get to. I think some of that shine has been worn off in Iowa, and people are coming to realize not only is that the reality, but he's also vulnerable. And there are good and legitimate alternatives to a guy like Donald Trump. So we'll have to see what New Hampshire beholds Super Tuesday following soon after.
Yeah, it seems like it's almost set up for Trump to be, some people would say it's good. I don't know that it is. He is set up to where he can, if he's ahead by 22 points in New Hampshire, if he doesn't clock everybody, in New Hampshire, they're going to look at him like there's something wrong. What's happening? You're going in the wrong direction. That's kind of how these things go, the
That's
momentum.
Right, especially after having a 7-point swing in Iowa, going from 28 down to 24.
So I really would be shocked if he doesn't win New Hampshire. I think that should be an easy state for him. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I think South Carolina will be a key, especially right before the super primaries and the SEC and all those southern states, Texas, etc. Why don't we go to a caller now? He just jumped off right when I was about to click to him. Let me go to another, because there was one thing we talked about and somebody wanted to mention something, and that is Larry in Georgia. Larry, I know you wanted to talk about socialism, which we brought up. Oh, he just dropped after I clicked to him as well. But I think that, and by the way, if you want to call and talk about the different candidates, who you like, what you think, what you're thinking now, then just call 1-800-351-1212, and we're happy to pull you into the conversation about whatever we're talking about. And certainly politics is one that we'll be talking about today for sure. The other thing that I think is important to watch is the money situation now, going into the end of Iowa here, you had Jeb Bush, who had raised a whole lot of money at the very beginning, and mainly that was through super PACs, not through his campaign. There was an article today, in fact, that said the people most situated money-wise were Clinton and Cruz, because in the last quarter alone, the Cruz campaign brought in $20 million. And it's, I think, by an average gift of $67. So it's a very grassroots-oriented type campaign. It's not like the super PACs where one person can write a really big check. To happen, do for instance the establishment supporters and money people start to send their money towards one person, and does that person get more support? I think we're going to have to watch, because as Ken Blackwell said earlier when he was on, he looked for those three things, and really it wasn't just the message, it was the consistent message, but then it was also the money and the machinery. And with all of these states coming, clicking off one after another, if you don't have those other things, I don't care what your message is, it's not going to work. And so we saw some of that with Donald Trump, not having the machinery in place.
That's exactly right. And I think you see the one candidate that has as Ken put it, the message, the money, and the muscle, and the momentum, as he threw a fourth M in there at the end of the discussion as well. And that is Ted Cruz, who's been able to pull all those things together. And look, for those that are kind of questioning as to whether or not we should be having money so much, just the offensive ability for a candidate to be able to spend the money to get ID and to get voters to the polls and that sort of thing. Money is a very important factor in playing defense as well. And for some of these candidates, especially those who are vying for that ever-fickle establishment vote or the moderate vote, that money is going to be very limited in supply, and we'll see exactly who that pulls out, especially when momentum starts drawing it to other attentions as well. So when you have someone that has the money bags already to be able to carry that in, that has the message, that has the muscle to be able to employ it well, that is a big leg up. That doesn't say that that's not the only leg up. It's just to say that it is a very big leg up.
Well, the other thing I think, because sometimes we wonder about these, we say, why should putting good structure in place and raising money and have to organize, being well organized in a national campaign, why is that important? I can't think of really a much better sort of challenge or preparation for being the president of the United States. When you're the president, you can't do everything. You're over a fairly large enterprise. You better know how to build things out, machinery and everything else. And if you've done a campaign, then you've had to do that. You've had to have people you could trust leading in certain areas. You've had to strategically lay things out. So actually, in a sort of odd way, it's really a very good comparison and preparation for whether you're fit to be president. We've got a number of callers on here now, and we're going to get to those on politics. Right after the break, we're going to have a legal guest about some new religious freedom information you need to hear about, and then we'll go to the politics.
When you're listening to or watching network news, do you ever start talking to the newsreader or anchor person? Come on, you can admit it, you do, don't you? You can't believe what you're hearing, and you feel the need to correct them. Sometimes you almost feel like you're living in a different world, and you are. People who deny God are living in a world of make-believe. The next time you're shaking your head at the news, I want you to do something. Pick up the phone, or write a check, or visit us online and give. Point of View brings you a biblically informed analysis of what's happening, but to do it, we need your partnership. Visit pointofview.net and click the link next to Donate Now where it says Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Or mail your donation for this month to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. That's Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Don't just shake your head. Make a difference. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Hi, this is Kelly Shakelford again, Liberty Institute, libertyinstitute.org. I'm sitting in for Kirby, and I have with me as a co-host today Jeremy Dice, a senior counsel at Liberty Institute, and we're going to take a quick break now in the elections. We'll get right back to that, but there's just some news that everybody needs to hear about, because I don't know how many people know about this, and this is really important. And so we've got as a guest online Ken Klukowski. Ken is a senior counsel and director of strategic affairs for Liberty Institute. He's a legal scholar. He's a journalist. His columns have been in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, Investors Business Daily. Breitbart, I know, uses Ken a lot. And really, I wanted Ken to come on today to talk about what's happening in Indiana on religious freedom, because this is something that is really somewhat of a test for the whole country. Ken, love having you on today, and look forward to your update on what is happening in Indiana with the religious freedom battle.
Kelly, thanks for having me. You too, Jeremy.
Well, Ken, we've got good news to report here today. I understand you went up to Indiana, I think, last week and talked to the Senate, and this week they're backing down on some threats to religious liberty. Tell us what's happened.
Well, that's exactly right, and praise God for this. I am so glad. Indiana, I should add, is my home state, so it has a real special place in my heart. And so I was in Indiana along with some of our friends and allies last week, testifying before the Indiana State Senate, and also meeting quietly with lawmakers and with other statewide leaders in Indiana. They were considering a bill, Senate Bills 100 and 344, that were being pushed by some major national left-wing groups, LGBT groups, and also supported by a number of business organizations, such as the Chamber of Commerce, that would have made homosexuals, bisexuals, and other groups, specially protected groups in the state of Indiana's civil rights laws. In essence, you would not be able, if you were a baker or a florist or a photographer, any sort of Christian business owner in Indiana, you would have to regard someone's sexual orientation the same as race. And so it was a bill, it was one of these bills that have been adopted by a number of the more liberal states nationwide, that we have seen these punishing lawsuits that have been used to go after Christians and other people of faith in various states. That was being considered and debated in the state of Indiana. It had made it out of a Senate committee by a 7-2 vote, and today that legislation was defeated. It is done in the state of Indiana. It will not be moving forward. It will not become law.
I think this is really important, because I bet most of the Point of View listeners don't realize what's happening in probably their state, because this is not just happening in a more liberal state. I saw it happen, I think, last year in Texas, where what's happening is these business and chamber of commerce groups, which are very powerful, these powerful business lobbying groups, have been co-opted somehow by the LGBT movement. And they're now saying that anytime any sort of religious freedom bill, that they don't even discuss, gay rights issues. It's just they're scared that if somebody has religious freedom, they might disagree with them on this issue. And so all the business power and everything gets unleashed against religious freedom.
That's right. There's been a very well-financed national effort going on pressuring business groups to say, if your business does not get on board supporting this new type of legislation, we might come out and say that you are anti-gay, that you do not welcome business from gay people, and it'll be a PR nightmare for your company. Now, of course, the reality is this. All of you know, as well as I do, and I'm sure your listeners know, that there is no epidemic nationwide of business owners who say, I'm not going to let that guy be a customer in my store because he's gay. None of that is going on whatsoever. The only instances that we have seen in the news are people being forced by the government to participate in a wedding that violates their faith's teaching about marriage being between a man and a woman, or a person being told that they have to convey a message about sexuality that they don't agree with, like the T-shirt company that was asked to do T-shirts for the Gay Pride event, and there was a cupcake store that was asked to do cupcakes celebrating a Gay Pride event. If we set aside people being asked to do something that violates their conscience or would force them to engage in some sort of speech that contradicts their Christian faith or other mainstream traditional faith, there have been no other such instances of it.
Well, so much for tolerance, huh? I mean, the right of people to have a different belief. I mean, that's really what we're fighting here is the right, the most basic right of religious freedom, the right to people to have a belief that's different from their either local government or state government, or, the right to hold to beliefs that Christians have had for thousands of years, and that really those definitions came out of the mouth of Christ himself. I mean, look at Matthew 19. God made them male and female. Therefore, a man shall leave his mother and father and be joined together. So, this is basic, fundamental, and they're saying we will destroy you through these laws. We will do everything. We'll bankrupt you. We will, the government will come after you because we're not going to allow you to have a religious freedom belief or defense in this state. That's what they're trying to do, at least.
Well, that's exactly right. What this fight is about is several years ago when President Obama nominated Kai Feldblum, that she said that she cannot imagine an instance where LGBT rights and religious liberty would clash, where she believed that religious liberty should prevail. And of course, as we've discussed before, as recently as last year after the Obergefell decision, there were LGBT leaders coming out saying that they believe they are only 3 years away from creating a legal and public policy environment from coast to coast in the United States where no one can claim religious conscience as a defense against being forced to participate in the LGBT agenda or in a redefinition of marriage. That is what this fight has come down to. And you're right, there's these exceptions that they temporarily allow in laws to say we're not talking about churches or church schools or whatnot. We're seeing lawsuits in Massachusetts, in New York, in these more liberal states where they are now going after the schools, going after the ministries, because they're very plain about their agenda that they don't believe anyone has a right to this belief anymore, and they will use every means necessary in order to stop that belief.
Ken, we remember a year ago, I guess it was, when Indiana was first embroiled in this kind of fiasco about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA, that they were trying to pass there, and then we saw some other permutations of that debate in Arkansas and other states. Many states have a RFRA, and the federal government has a RFRA. How is that playing into this entire debate? Is RFRA under scrutiny in Indiana? Are we at risk of losing it?
In fact, just last week, as they were debating this bill, part of this bill, and I believe this is one of the things that led to its defeat today, is that there were legislators who actually attached an amendment to this SOGI bill last week to also repeal Indiana's RFRA, would have made it the first state in the entire United States to have stripped the religious protections of RFRA away from its people.
That's just, I hope people understand, how radical this is. The idea that we're scared that somebody might have religious freedom protection and therefore they might have a different belief on sexuality. And because of that, we don't want people to have any religious freedom. We want to take it all away. It's just unbelievable. But the reality is, if any one issue is allowed to trump religious freedom because it's popular or it has political power, then you don't have religious freedom anymore. Because whatever the next popular issue or the next power, it will trump religious freedom. This goes back to the very founding of our country. It's why people came here, because they wanted to have the ability to be able to live at peace, even if they had a different religious belief from the government, whether they're a Quaker or, whatever their religious background is. That's why we founded this country. And I really feel like we're turning full circle here. And we're re-battling this battle and going to decide if we're still going to stay what America was all about.
I think that's right, Kelly. The people who came, Europe was the most civilized, the most wealthy, the most comfortable place in the planet back in the 1600s and 1700s. There's a reason that a group of people chose to leave all of those comforts, a land that they knew, to cross an ocean, which back in those days was extremely dangerous, to cross an ocean to a continent that was full of wilderness, to hack their way through that wilderness, losing their children and their spouses along the way. They didn't do it just so they could worship for an hour on Sunday morning. They did it so that they could live their lives according to the dictates of their conscience. That is why these things are enshrined in the First Amendment to our Constitution as
Ken, it's great having you on. We'll be right back, and we'll go back into the elections and take some phone calls.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kelly Shakelford back on Kelly Shakelford Liberty Institute. Go and look at any of the cases there, the religious liberty. It's just incredible what's happening around the country, the battles we're having to be in. The good news is we're winning, but we're having to fight. The other thing I want to make sure you know about before we get off the air today is, and it's been a privilege to be here today on Point of View, just really respect this program and the incredible service that it does for people all over the country. And that is that if you have not registered to vote, this is the last month for you to register to vote in 28 states. So it's time to get with it. If you moved, if you're not sure, and all you have to do is go to pointofview.net. And at pointofview.net, it's got a deal that says vote, and it'll lead you right through it. And again, I can say this because I don't work for Point of View. You need to donate to Point of View. I mean, you listen to this, even if you just listen to it once a week, you need to make sure that you're helping provide this not only for yourself, but for others. And so there's a way to hit a button to donate now when you go there as well. Let's get back to some talk on the elections. I know there's a bunch of people that are on the lines, and I'm going to start with David from Georgia. David, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Say what you wanted to say about the elections.
What I wanted to say is, as a pastor of a church here in Georgia, Kelly, I was real enthused last night about Ted Cruz. That's my choice. I think he's on a little bit of a momentum here, and I'm looking forward to good things down in Georgia, South Carolina, in this area. And I think a lot of this, people are getting back, especially Christians, to pray. And, 2 Chronicles 7:14, we know what that says about it. We'll humble ourselves and turn from our wicked ways, repent, seek the Lord, and God would hear. I believe this is what's going on as a whole with this country, Christians, and I'm just enthused about the turnout in the election, and everybody's getting on board and trying to take their country back. Maybe one way to do it, and that's in prayer. It's not with words, but it's prayer.
That's
and
interesting.
That's my comment.
Yeah. Hey, I've been around for a long time doing this kind of stuff, and I've seen faith sort of connectors for different campaigns. But what I read in the paper, I had never seen before, and that is, evidently the Cruz campaign was getting so many calls, and they had all these big pastor groups that were involved. But they had so many calls from people that wanted to be on a prayer chain, I think it's a weekly call or something, where people all over the country were the only thing they were doing was getting together to pray for the nation. And so I think, David, your point is a good one. And I know one of the things I heard in the acceptance speech last night was Senator Cruz thanking, I think he said, the over 150 pastors in Iowa who came together early to start his whole pastors movement. Now, he has an advantage there because his dad's a pastor. Everybody knows Rafael Cruz in his story of coming from Cuba, very similar background to when you hear Marco Rubio. It's just one of those American stories. But I think prayer is key. So really appreciate your call, David.
Steve Deace writes today at the Conservative Review, kind of looking back at the entire campaign. I thought his last paragraph was probably the most poignant. I won't read the whole thing, but he ends it by observing that nobody knows a candidate better than his family does, which is why I typically eliminate candidates right away whose families are nowhere to be found when they're running. You can fool the general population, he says, but you can't fool your own family. And for the Cruz campaign to have made their family front and center in this campaign, I think says a lot about Ted Cruz, who he is. As Steve Deace says, he's the same man the rest of you see on the stage, warts and all.
Yep, and I think we've got a lot of good good families running. I mean, again, on the Republican side, I think everybody says there's a wealth of good candidates, much more than before. And in the past, it was always sort of the moderate, kind of very restrained, boring candidate, and a bunch of conservatives running against each other with no money and no campaign.
And let's not forget to observe the obvious here. The top three vote getters here, or the top three of the top four vote getters here, were two Hispanic gentlemen and an African American on the Republican side. It is a very different story on the Democratic side of the ticket. The party of diversity appears to be on the GOP this go round.
Now let me go next to Philip in Tennessee. I think Philip's a Trump supporter. Philip, you on?
Yeah, Phil. Hey, I want to push back on you a little bit.
Sure.
I know this is a point of view, but, I could see why folks are, why they're fed up with the media, because just a little while ago I heard one of you say, and you said it kind of in a disingenuous way, in a way that only Trump would do this, that Trump would say anything, and I've not decided who I'm going to vote for, but you said that Trump would say anything to get voted, to be voted for, to get you to believe in. You can't tell me that, you all sound pretty hung up on Cruz right now, but Cruz, Rubio, every one of them had said things just to get ratings. So in the particular context you said it in, it was a little disingenuous on how you said it and what you implied.
Well, I'll take that correction nicely, Philip, and I appreciate you calling in for the show on that. I did say that, and I'm certain that no one would be a politician who hasn't said something to please a certain demographic and probably have changed the way they've said it in order to please that demographic from time to time. The problem I have with the Trump campaign in general is that he's gone from being mainly a leftist candidate to being now portrayed, at least in the press, or at least how he's portraying himself, as a very conservative candidate. I don't think that is actually the case. And if you use his own words, I think it was Stephen Colbert just last week had a debate between new Trump and old Trump that was rather contradictory at times. And so I have misgivings by someone who has said one thing that is staunchly and 100% opposite of the other one, and doesn't appear to have a real moral center to be able to go forward and to really depend upon where he may stand on a variety of fronts. I don't see that in Donald Trump. Many others may be able to see that. Maybe they see something I don't. I just simply don't see that in Donald Trump.
Well, I would just ask that you call it all the way, then. Again, how you say that is that Donald Trump is the only one candidate up there that would say something just to get elected.
Yeah, no,
I think you would need to represent, be truthful, and everyone does that. So just how, in the context that you said it, it just made it sound like, Trump was the only one and no one else would dare do that. So I would just ask that you just be fair.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, I mean, hopefully nobody would just say whatever to get elected. I mean, you'd hope not. I mean, there are people of that low character. Certainly, though, there are people who changed their message. In fact, one of the articles I know we have online, it's Rubio's surge is a triumph for Trumpism. And what they're saying here is that Rubio's message has changed during the campaign, and that he has surged by, quote, borrowing Trump's message while pledging to more effectively package it. And one of a congratulations to Trump, because his message is even being taken over by the guy that's considered the establishment candidate and trying to make it more palatable. I think everybody does that to some extent in politics. I think the key, and I know what Jeremy was probably after, is what are people really like? What are their real morals? What are their real positions? Because when push comes to shove, that's probably where they're going to, you fall where you're leaning. And so I think that's what people want to know as well, is what really is your stance on these things, so that I know that you're not going to back out on me later. But great call, Philip, and thanks for the comments. We're too late. I mean, I've got some more calls. I'd love to get to them, but we're too low on time to do so. Jeremy, thanks for being on. And if you have any last words to say, we've got a few seconds at least to say them.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here. And I think it's important as we walk out of this segment and into the rest of our day to remember that it is we the people who get to direct this country. And we do ourselves a favor when we learn the most we can about each one of our candidates and decipher fact from fiction as much as we're able to through all the marketing and all the glitz that is put upon them to be able to steward well the vote that has been entrusted to our care.
And thank you, Point of View listeners. Go to the website, pointofview.net, for more information, and be involved, be really informed, and share that information with others. Have a great day.
Later this year, for the 58th time, America will choose a president. As a Christian, what are you doing to prepare for the election? Helping you cut through the major media spin is part of the mission of Point of View. We want to provide the best election resources, including a new website, Pray, Organize, Vote, encouraging people to intercede for the upcoming election, to help you get registered so you can exercise the stewardship of voting, to share things to help you get people involved and out to the polls. But to do all of that, we need you to vote right now with your support for Point of View. Show us that you're in this for the long haul as a citizen of heaven as well as the United States. Click Donate Now at the top of the page and give the most generous one-time gift you can at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. There is a lot of work to be done. Let's get to it together. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.